the intro to comic book writing. So a lot of the basic stuff up front. We're going to talk a lot about how writing for comics is different from writing for other media. We're going to talk about the rules of writing for comics. We're going to talk about the writer's job as part of the comics team. And then we're going to talk about how once the idea is hatched for a story, how the creative team then proceeds. Okay. Not only am I going to be your instructor, I'm going to be your editor in chief. So I'll be the person who is going to be giving you the notes along with Scott, and you're going to be working on deadlines that I give you, and we'll make this as professional seeming as possible. Comics also ask the readers to relate images to each other without always explaining what's happening. And you guys have to piece together what is happening in a scene from the images that you're given. Here's an example of that. This is again from Scott McCloud's books. This is, water boiling on a stove. You can tell it's a stove. We see hands chopping vegetables. We see a woman in what looks like a standard kitchen, and we see a mixing bowl, a timer, and a spoon stirring. Now we assume, because we're relating all these images to each other, this is all happening in the same kitchen, that this is the same woman chopping this vegetable, and that this is all taking place basically at the same time. You're not seeing the camera move from the pot to the hands, to the woman, to all the stuff. That's all happening in between the panels, right? This is the page that sets the scene for the first issue, all right? We're starting out close on something, and then we're pulling back and we're pulling up, and we're seeing more of the scene, getting the whole picture until we realize we're looking out a window, looking down at the street. Okay. That's what we're seeing. Here is how the script looked. This is the script for Watchmen issue 1. Page 1, panel 1, and there's the description. Now, here's the panel that he's talking about. All of that description is for this, the 3 magazines strategy. And I have used this, and it has come in incredibly handy when I'm really hard up for ideas. Again, there are no rules about how to vanquish writer's block. There are no rules for this. There are just tips for how you can spur your brain on to maybe have ideas where you wouldn't otherwise. And the 3 magazine ideas suggest that you go to a newsstand, if there is a newsstand anywhere, maybe it's just online, but go to the websites or pick up magazines for 3 topics that you wouldn't normally read about or explore. So in my case, that might be Cat Fancy. I probably wouldn't read an issue of Cat Fancy, whether it was online or in print. I'm a dog person, so that's probably a good choice for me. I could read Forbes. I'm not super fascinated in how rich people make all their money, so I probably wouldn't read it or understand it much. So I might pick up that as well. I'm not a car aficionado, so why not pick up an issue of Hot Rod? New Zealand's #1 hot rod read, by the way. And the idea is that these aren't things that you would normally read, so they might inspire some ideas you wouldn't normally have. Because a log line is, by and large, the first way you're going to present your story to an editor, to a publisher, to a potential buyer of any kind. Because their first question is going to be, nice to meet you, what you got? What's your story? And they are going to have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of patience and a limited amount of focus to listen to you. So what you tell them in response has to be brief. It has to be punchy. You have to sell it with emotion, with passion, whether it's on the page or whether it's verbally. You have to hook them. What I want to do now is break you guys into 16 different rooms. And each of you is going to have a genre assigned to your room. And I would like for you to come up with elements you think belong in that genre. Can be settings, can be characters, can be plot lines, whatever you like. A lot of tropes in detective stories, quite a few. So mystery, yes, clearly. Detectives solve crimes and they figure out who done what, and that's usually a mystery. Usually private investigators, but not always. That is true, and it's a good clarification. Justice tends to be served, unlike noir. That's true. Not always, but That's true. Detail oriented, yeah. Figuring out the ordering of the clues that the detective finds and how that all fits together into who who committed the crime and even why. That's always part of a detective story. Multiple suspects, but not always. But that's true. I mean, how many times have we seen all of the suspects, all of the people who were present in the mansion the night of the murder? The detective brings them all into one room and says, "Nobody can leave here until we find out who killed blah blah blah." That happens quite a bit. Interrogation, yeah. Questioning the subjects. Um, Character driven, yeah, I think that's true. I think often the detective gets at who may have committed the crime by way of figuring out who had the motive, and motive tends to go back to character in a lot of cases. Let's move over to horror. Well, the characters split up, of course they do. You know exactly who's doomed the minute it happens. Demonic magic, supernatural elements, the monster or slasher, a scary setting, like in the woods or at summer camps, places that are haunted or secluded, supernatural creatures or cryptids, the couple that gets freaky at the wrong time. Yeah, true. And last but not least, let's talk about heists. Uh, Heist tropes include there's a group of people who are getting together to pull the heist. They're a ragtag bunch. They come from different backgrounds. They have different specialties. They don't know each other necessarily too well beforehand. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. Or they knew each other back in the day. I think both of those things show up in Ocean's 11. There are people that aren't haven't been part of the group before who are coming in new, but there are also people who have worked together on various crimes or various schemes. The roster introduction, the basic traits, the meet cute. I think we want to say MEET, but there are cute cuts of every kind of meat, I suppose. I haven't really gone looking. And then the specialties, yeah, lock picking, computer hacking. There's a sympathetic element. I think that's very important. In heist stories, you're following the crooks much more often than you're following the good guys. And so through that, you're building up a sense of sympathy towards the characters that aren't necessarily heroes. There's always a planning phase. That's true. Blueprints, maps, the details of the crime that's going to be pulled. There's usually high stakes. I have to pull this off or it's go directly to jail. The heist itself does not line up with the planning phase. That's true. Things hardly ever go according to plan. There's always some kind of monkey wrench that gets thrown in. There's a double cross or some backstabbing. There's a mole for the cops. There's somebody on the inside who is reporting back to the law enforcement. A detective antagonist and or other pursuers. Yes, there's always that opposing force that is working against the thieves. Plot twist, larger goal and or stakes than anticipated. You think the heist pullers are doing one thing, but they're really doing another. Die Hard jumps to mind. Visually muted color palette. Often, yeah. I never really thought about that, but I think that's probably a good one to include here. This is a very basic diagram of story structure that, again, is the same for all kinds of media. And you'll see that here's your story starting point. Here's your story's ending point on the right, and it's broken into 3 acts. You'll notice that Act 1 and Act 3 are significantly shorter than Act 2. That is generally true, no matter what kind of story you're reading. Act 1 is, if you're working on a screenplay, let's say, for example, and an average screenplay is 120 pages long, your first act is going to be in the vicinity of 30 pages, so about a quarter of your story, right? And Act 3 is going to be the same. It's also going to be about a quarter of your story, about 30 pages. And Act 2 is the biggest part of your story, and that's going to be about 60 pages. So that's the remainder of it. In Act 1, your story gets off to a start. And that's usually prompted by an inciting incident, something that happens in the first page or 2 of your comic that kicks your story off really fast and pulls in the audience in a way that hooks them and makes them want to read the entire story. So there's a crawl before the movie starts that tells you takes place in outer space, takes place a long time ago. There's a conflict between the rebels and the Empire. You know that information going in, right? The first big plot point, story beat, is inside and outside the rebel ship. You see the chase. The Empire boards the rebel ship. We meet our antagonist, our chief bad guy, Darth Vader. We see the princess putting a message into R2 for Obi-Wan Kenobi. We don't know who that is. And as the Empire works its way through the ship, R2 and 3PO manage to escape and go down to the surface of the planet that happens to be just below them. So you don't have to be writing the great American novel here, or the great Australian novel, or Canadian novel, wherever you're from. You don't have to be writing that. It doesn't have to be beautiful prose. It has to be clear, it has to be direct, and it has to give the artist a really good idea of what you're thinking of and what you're picturing in your mind. So now they're en route to drop Ben off, but as they're going there, they find dead Jawas, murdered by blaster fire, and their ruined Sandcrawler, their vehicle. Ben realizes they were murdered by Imperial troopers. So this is an important plot point because this is furthering the larger story that Luke still isn't really quite a part of yet, but it's moving that part of the story forward. So Luke recognizes these Jawas are the ones that sold him the droids. He knows that's going to lead the Imperial troopers back home. So he and Ben and the droids race back to Luke's farm. And when they get there, they find the aunt and uncle murdered. And they know that he and the droids, or the droids for sure, are the Imperial forces' next target. So this is Luke's chance to get involved in the war on the rebel side. Finally, he doesn't have anything keeping him there. So he can go, and Luke announces that fact that he's leaving with Tatooine to accompany Ben to Alderaan and join the rebellion and be part of this fight. And there's your plot point one. All right, gang. Looks like I've exhausted your questions. Thank you for hanging out. I look forward to reading your log lines. I will talk to you on Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to talk about genre. We're going to talk about format. And we're going to talk some about outlining everybody's least favorite step of this whole process. So I will look forward to seeing you then. Have a good couple of days until then. All right. Thank you.